Hello, welcome to the Crackpot Podcast.
It's gonna be a beautiful day to start up a revolution. Molotov cocktails, martini shotgun shells. Wow, 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 wild one. God forbid the cops get called. I say the more the merrier inside this free-for-all. By God, I gotta see it all. I got front row tickets to the greatest show of all.
Alright, well, welcome to the Crackpot Podcast. This is the first one we're taping in the new year, but you will hear it later than that. So Happy New Year, James.
Happy New Year, Lynn. I am now, once again, out on the theft coast in the same time zone as you.
Yeah, that's right.
So I didn't need as much coaching to get the time right.
I still need it. I have to be super careful when I'm scheduling stuff. So we haven't taped in a long time. I don't know when was the last time we taped. Well, actually, hold on. Speaking of that, let me check my tape. Tape is running. You're out in the Seattle area and hiking and enjoying the rainy, snowy, sleety weather.
About 1,200 feet up in the foothills of the Cascade. When I take a 3-mile walk up on the shoulder of the mountain, I can see Seattle. It looks to me like it's 20 to 30 miles away, but my range perception is pretty much limited to across the street and down the block, so who knows what that really means. I forgot the calculation for the curvature of the Earth, and I don't really know how high the office buildings are down there. But it looks like a distant view of some model mock-up of the scene of Blade Runner. Those days I've gone up there, it just looks real cloudy down in Seattle, like they're wrapped in these dark clouds. And then when I look east to the mountains that I actually came through on the train, they keep getting higher and with more snow on them. And these are the most beautiful mountains I've been in. They're almost completely covered in evergreen.
Yeah, the Rockies are drier, right? They're bigger and more dramatic, but they're more dry and not as much tree cover. Is that true?
This is even wetter than Pennsylvania here.
There's parts of that part of the world, like Olympia National Park, that are technically rainforest. So it's temperate rainforest because it's got hot and cold weather. So it gets a ton of rain up there.
Yeah. So yesterday it wasn't even raining, and I was walking through foot-deep puddles on this access road up into the mountains. So it was supposedly not raining yesterday, but there was still rain coming down. But that's not raining around here. Yeah.
I mean, the fog, if I live in Northern California and I lived on the coast, and it's like sometimes the fog really is rain. It's sort of like precipitation, even if it's not a rain cloud. It's because the cloud is all around you, and so it's kind of like rain, but it doesn't count as a storm.
Yeah, so far I've spent 5 days in the Cascades, and including 2 days on a train. A tree fell across the track. They gave us free beef stew. It wasn't 2 days in the Cascades, but it was 2 days out of North Dakota, in which we had snow pretty much the whole time.
Is the train
And
cozy when it's
oh,
snowing outside? Yeah.
I got on Sunday night. I sat up with a guy who I'll call him IPA Ray, and I think we split like a case of IPAs and got hammered, uh,
Oh dear.
discussing history.
Those aren't good for your testosterone. It's now not recommended because those hoppy beers, hops have estrogenic properties.
It makes sense why monks drank it, and while I'm cooped up on a train, I think it makes sense that I could.
You could use the calming effect.
Right, I could appease the people around me, and so yeah, that was a really nice experience. But since that train went into the Cascades, like I guess Sunday morning, and now I haven't looked at any of these mountains and not seen them at least partially wreathed in fog or mist. So it's really pretty. I really like it, and I will hopefully write some horror stories set in this location.
Nice. So tell us what happened for the Baltimore Murderbowl final tally.
Oh, actually, my dear mother called me up and she said we hit 350. So she's actually partially transferred her allegiance from the Baltimore Ravens to the Reds. So I felt pretty good about that. Mom's coming along.
Now, Baltimore Sun is telling me still 348. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that.
Okay, so the news reports, they had a running tally. Mm-hmm. What's, I think, already happened that's got you back down to 348. The same thing has happened in the past 5 years. At the end of the year, they start reclassifying people as having miraculously not been killed. Okay, and have, like Uthames, left life according to some means other than death. That's apparently what's happened. They're already editing the killings down, reclassifying them. I don't know. It's burglaries, robberies. I don't know.
Even 348 is
pathetic explorations of the human experience. I don't know what they're reclassifying them as.
348 is still outstanding, even if that's what the official tally ends up being. It's still a huge performance. It's huge. 348.
They could have stopped killing people on September 29th and still crushed the whole middleweight division, and it's just ridiculous. Now, one thing that's really important is that New York City has clocked 306 murders on the year. Well, last year it was only like 220. And I've talked to a New York City police officer and some residents in New York City, and New York is becoming much more violent. It's already starting to spiral into like this 1970s type of rampaging.
Like a pre-Giuliani New York City.
Yeah, so that's really huge news to me. I didn't think what could happen in Baltimore this past year could happen. What did happen could happen. I just didn't realize it. But
not many places have the raw talent that Baltimore has, though.
This is true.
This
is true. They actually set a 59-year-old dude on fire. They burned his head alive in East Baltimore a couple nights ago. So.
God. And you guys they're having kind of a warm winter, and it's not. I mean, they have not slowed down one bit for the weather. Usually December is a slow month, but December was a huge month.
It goes to show that the champions, they have a certain championship mindset. Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't just rest on your laurels.
No. So that brings me to the West Coast. What's happening on the West Coast that is calling my attention or catching my attention. There has been more types of violence between the group of oppressed individuals that we have, and part of this topic is that, like, we'll call them my Negroes and your Negroes, right? My Negroes would never stand a chance in Baltimore, I fear. I think that your talent, your home local talent, is just far exceeds what's going on out here. Is that these young oppressed individuals are stalking grocery store parking lots and attacking Asian grandmothers. Just about the
Well,
softest target you could hope for.
they do that in the East Coast too, but that's just training. That's what you send the 13-year-old kids out to do that. Mama sends her kids out to go beat up old people. In Philadelphia, a lot of Koreans get it, but usually it's your standard ghost guilt creature that's being hit on parking lots. I used to deal with this as a ghetto grocer, and also that was half of the time in the Baltimore area. That was crackheads that were doing that. That's what a soft target that is. That you'd have the kind of people that were at the bottom of the drug food chain in Baltimore were actually engaged in that. But I think the dynamic is that most of the people from on the West Coast, the melanated individuals on the West Coast, they came from the West, from Mississippi, Arkansas, and Western Tennessee, like the Memphis area. And that was just different than the people that came to the Mid-Atlantic region. They came from Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia, almost exclusively. So yours are trans-Appalachian. So the types that you got there's going to be something different about their ancestral experience, and maybe how and why they got to the West Coast. It's not something looked into.
I'm not sure the ancestral sources, but also I think it's just the easy life. That something is different about even between Baltimore and Chicago. Maybe it's partly the origin, but it's also just the way that they come up and are trained. I mean, I think I'm not going all nature on this. I think there's a nurture element. And my guys are just soft, left coast. Everybody here. I used to work in a Midwest town. My job had me go out a few times a year to this town in the Midwest, and a guy told me, and first of all, everybody who saw me and my coworkers and they knew we were from California, they have this kind of cringe, like, oh, California. And I think there's two aspects of it. One is that they think that there's some kind of snobbery that I'm going to have being from California and being in the Midwest. And number two is like they think that we're totally insane. And I think in many cases both of those are correct, but I tried really hard to make friends with people out there and not act totally insane. This guy told me that he said that, in California, you guys are really lazy because the weather is nice and there's lots of fun stuff to do, like go to the beach and stuff. And I told him that's not true at all. That California, I mean, we have nice weather, but people here work really hard, especially in Silicon Valley. People work like slaves. And it's true that there's the beach and we like to go to the beach, but there are lazy people here, but they're also hard workers. But I fear that the gangsters are rather on the lazy side compared to your gangsters.
Probably. And if it's the same group of people in Portland as you have down in California, I don't know. The darker skinned guy that I met in Portland was a fairly rough guy. I mean, not by Baltimore standards, okay? I think he was from Tacoma, which I heard it's kind of like not a nice town for law enforcement people in this part of the country. But first night, Big Tony took me out to a strip club. These four, I don't know, they were like maybe Richard Spencer's third string servants. They were like quadroons and octoroons. They were really pale and washed out. These guys would have been beat up by black chicks in Baltimore, like on a recreational basis, and they probably would have called them caramel queers or milk duds or something like that. They actually were terrified of me just because my head was shaved. And I mean, I was a short, fat, old dude. I mean, it was ridiculous.
No, but when your head is freshly shaved, you give an aura of menace.
Okay,
I've seen it on video.
They dared this one guy to come over and make a joke with me, and then he did. And I like politely left because he was trying, and then he apologized to me, and I was don't ruin it by apologizing. I mean, it was funny enough. I'm not insulted. And then Tony comes, because Tony's been getting the beers. And Tony shows up, and I mean, if anybody thinks I'm scary and they see him, I mean, he literally looks like he could just put like a fur coat on and he could be Bigfoot. He sits down next to me, and I get up to go to the bathroom, and I got back and they were gone. And Tony's like, I don't know what you said to those guys, but I think they're afraid of you. They like bolted like right away. I was like, no, dude, they thought I was like a white supremacist leader, and probably when they just my muscles stood up, they probably took one look at you and said, "Oh hell no," and they just left. Yeah, I mean the whole environment was just so sissified. Like the two bouncers, one they had long hair, they looked like roadies for Leonard Skinner. Either one of us could have probably taken both of them out, just like. On just pure evil, just the fact that we're rotten dudes would have been enough for us to take these guys. I mean, they didn't do anything the way they should have done it. They just wanted to make friends with us. And you could keep this place open with those guys as bouncers. That's a soft area. I mean, and then I found out that half the people I ran into in Portland had fled from rougher cities like Milwaukee, Detroit. The one black dude from Tacoma, his girlfriend had come to Tacoma from Baltimore. She basically fled Baltimore. So, and apparently some of them are coming up from Los Angeles, which I guess is supposed to be a dangerous place in that half of the planet.
LA used to be like major gangster thing, but all the melanated individuals have been squeezed out by the Aztec individuals. Okay. So it's still, I mean, it's dangerous in its way, but I don't think it hits Baltimore.
Well, where I think the nurture part comes in with this, the left coast Ebons trying to keep up with their right coast brethren, it's probably going to be the same thing. We're going to see the light skin, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4 Caucasian is going to try harder to earn his gangster cred because he kind of feels denatured. That's the light-skinned guys for the last 10 years in the East Coast have just been so much more violent, so much more aggressive, so much less good at it. The two guys
I have a proposal.
You know?
I propose something as a hypothesis. I have no idea if this is the case. But here in the Bay Area, this is it's becoming quite a melting pot. Like, I would say that Asians marry out a good half of the time. I think Indians and Pakistanis and subcontinentals tend to go home to India to get married. But like American-born Asians don't have any kind of racial preference for each other. And a lot of white man, Asian female couples are very common. And what Africans we have are of different, like, blended levels. I think, and we have like Filipinos and Vietnamese and people who, like a lot of times it's hard to tell who's who, and so many Mexicans. So I would guess that we're going to have in the Bay Area kind of a culture of mixing where a mulatto kid might find like a clique of kids who just are just racially indeterminate. But you guys don't really have that in Baltimore. Like it's black and white and mixed, and the other elements are newer and less integrated.
Yeah, and the mixed guys, if they've got a lot going for them, they just want to be with the pale faces out in the outlying areas. And if they don't have a lot going for them, then they end up being either gay, or they get into gangster rap to prove themselves that way, or they become exceptionally vicious. So because there's no one light-skinned guys from Baltimore, they go through a lot of hazings when they're kids. And usually, generally, the guys that have more sense are the darker-skinned guys, just because they don't seem like they've gone through that hazing. that's put a chip on their shoulder as much as the lighter skinned guys. And then when you get to places like these small towns in Pennsylvania where I've been spending time, those guys are all heavily mixed. And then you get into this thing that I'm thinking might apply out west at some point, that these 1/4 African guys, they still see themselves as black because of the one drop rule in this country. And they're trying to act like cartoon black, just like stupid black.
Yeah. And
The two guys that attacked Oliver, when he was taking the trash out, he's like, I didn't expect these light-skinned faggots to be coming up to me and trying to attack me, right? I mean, but they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, got their asses kicked, as they should have. But that, and the other thing that'll happen is a lighter-skinned guy that's in a mix that, maybe he's in dark chocolate, milk chocolate, and caramel in his gang. The light-skinned guy tends to get dared to do more daring things and tends to agree to it. Okay, they only really do that with the dark-skinned guys unless he's really stupid, and then it's just a way of using him kind of like as a scapegoat and stuff, and he's the one that's going to get in trouble. So if you have a dark-skinned guy breaks out from a group, a mixed-tone group, to break bad with you, the other guys have put him up to it, sort of like a joke, almost hoping he's going to fail and you're going to jack him up so they can make fun of him. And then if they're doing the same thing with a light-skinned guy, it's kind of to vet him and make sure he's got the balls to actually carry through with it. And they'll be more likely to back that guy up if things go his way. Okay? But if things don't go his way, they'll make fun of him just like they'd make fun of the dark-skinned dummy, if it didn't go his way. It's,
right.
That's an interesting dynamic.
We've been speaking with Dr. LaFond, PhD of neurology, and I have a more advanced question for you. So there was another robbery. Please close the door. Mama is cold. Okay. There was this robbery. Okay, a young Asian man was working at his laptop in a Starbucks. An oppressed individual runs in, grabs the laptop, and runs out. The Asian oppressor thought that he might try to retrieve his property, his reparation donation, and outside, the getaway driver struck the Asian man and killed him. So what we have is a robbery turned into a murder. And something has been happening, which I observed, and I need to get your feedback on. So first thing is that the sister, so there's two young oppressed individuals getting charged here, and one of them is having all these family members come out. So first the sister comes out, and she said that, this isn't, that my brother is innocent. He was at home all day with me. The police are wrong. It's true that brother has done this type of robbery before. However, that doesn't prove anything, etc., etc. So she's kind of going out to the media and giving this alibi. And then the young man's aunt comes out and says that her heart goes out to the victim's family, but that really, if you're getting robbed, you should not try to be a Superman, a superhero. You should just hand over your laptop, and he would be alive today if he had just handed over his laptop.
Hey, she's right. This is what Officer Friendly told every class of us kids in the 1970s when we were being indoctrinated. Do not fight if anybody attacks you. Police officers didn't even start suggesting resisting abduction until a whole fast food restaurant full of people got executed in Queens in like the 1990s when they put them in a walk-in and then they executed them. So for generations, people in this country have been taught that you're not supposed to resist property crimes. Indeed, if you hurt anybody while resisting a property crime, it's going to be as if you attack them out of the blue, because you're not allowed to use force legally in this country to protect your property, only to protect your life. So this lady has correctly imbibed the ambrosia of the gods, and like this Asian guy, he didn't get it, and a lot of Caucasians still don't get it, that in the new America, there are no property rights, okay? And to the extent that there are provisional property rights, they only extend to the point at which you donate for reparations, and they never extend to the realm of the use of force to preserve your property. I mean, that's just standard. If you look at this, if the Asian guy would have been Jackie Chan and he ran out there and he hit this guy like in the throat with a heel kick or something like that, and that guy died, manslaughter at best, maybe murder too. Okay? Because that computer is not worth the thief's life.
All right.
The thief is the property of the system. You have just damaged system property.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. But what about this behavior in the family, like where everybody comes out and gives public statements? Is that normal? Is that something?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, back in the early 80s, it was, my baby, and didn't do nothing wrong, my baby. This was like, I heard that like every time some hood rat got shot by the cops, okay, for like trying to shoot the cops. It's always, that's it. And a lot of what it is, it's actually kind of a projecting shield of guilt, because I guarantee you that sister used to beat this boy's ass. Part of the reason why he's out there trying to prove himself is because his older sister probably used to beat the shit out of him all the time. His mother, all these women that have said my baby, they let their boyfriends beat this kid up. They throw this kid out of the house when they want to get high, when they want to get laid, when they want to get drunk, and they got a man coming over. These kids are literally sent out to commit violent crimes so mama can get her weed and her liquor and her groove. So when this results in them getting killed, they momentarily feel guilty. Then they reflexively spout out something that exonerates themselves by sounding like they're his cheerleader, and then they magically no longer feel guilty again. It's like a 5-second guilt process, and then it's over. So that's why the system needs to use these people as actionists and as enforcers and as instigators. Because you can't guilt them. You just can't make these people feel guilty. So
I have another reparation story. It's sort of a similar. You reminded me of it because you talked about the mamas. But there's in Oakland. Oakland is a really mess of a city. I mean, a couple years ago, this warehouse caught on fire, and it was really horrific fire. A lot of people died because this warehouse was being used as a just like a squatting collective, and there was dozens of people living in there, and there was absolutely no regard to safety. Like just imagine the extension cords and whatever was going on in there, but it was an absolute hellscape nightmare, and lots of people died. There was another warehouse fire, I think, that nobody died in that one, which is wonderful, but they have these really precarious living arrangements because housing is so expensive, and so we have these two women who were squatting in a house, two homeless black women and some number of children, and there's this push to get the landlord to just give them the house. They were just squatting in this house. It's got some kind of absentee owner. There's a lot of Asian landlords in the Bay Area. Some are American Asians, some are just foreign nationals. And they oftentimes would rather just keep a property empty because in the Bay Area, real estate values go up no matter what, apparently. So sometimes it makes sense to own a property and not even rent it. So I think that's a source of another racial dynamic that might be part of this. But it's actually in court now. Like, what are we going to do? The court says you can't kick the women out. So they're living in this house in Oakland for free. It's pretty cool. Well, so I'm watching that case.
I think it's IQ-based reparations because there's no history of these Asian people enslaving African people. So I would just say it's purely IQ-based reparations. And that kind of makes sense with the feminization of our society and the fact that people who succeed because they're better equipped to succeed are regarded as villains just because they pulled ahead in the race. Now, in Baltimore, if you'd have told me about those two warehouse fires or any place in the East Coast, particularly New York, Baltimore, D.C., and Philadelphia, I'd say that either somebody in city government or somebody connected with real estate had either cops, firemen, or private investigators set those fires and blame it on the homeless people.
There's huge number of fires in Baltimore right now. So, if you have any information on that, I would be curious. But the numbers of just houses burning is impressive. And but these warehouses, like, it's hard to describe what those living conditions are. It's like you have dozens of homeless people just camped out with electrical wires, with cigarettes and drugs smoked everywhere, and music, and I mean it's just a nightmare. So, and like staircases going up and down, no regard to exits, no windows. The building doesn't even have windows. It's a warehouse.
Well, in Baltimore, there's a pattern when there's only one house left on a street, on a block. Well, you're talking about 20 houses. Let's say there's only one left that's occupied. All of a sudden, the homeless people squatting in one of the houses start a fire. And there's pressure to condemn the whole block and that family to move out. And the families will almost always say those homeless people didn't start that fire. We saw Baltimore City Fire Department yesterday just walking around looking at stuff.
All right.
So...
Well, there's a big lawsuit over this. They call it the ghost ship, and they're suing the electrical company.
Well, in New York, they call it Old Testament lightning.
I've heard that. Insurance, yeah. All right, I want to do. We have limited time today, so I'm going to keep moving. I want to do a current event, which by the time you hear this will not be current. But we had this Iranian issue thing going on where U.S. Assassinated some important Iranian guy, Suleimani, and then in retaliation, Iran seems to have done this intentionally ineffectual attack of sending a few ballistic missiles over, and so people, in case people don't know what ballistic means like you launch it and then you just wait. It's not, whereas a guided missile has something on board that tells the missile how to find you. So ballistic missiles, like, easier to use missile defense or predict where it's going to hit and evacuate and stuff like that. But anyway, so they sent over a few ballistic missiles. It seems like they didn't kill one American nor even one Iraqi. And they're even saying that Iranian military gave heads up to U.S. military. So it's like this kind of face-saving thing where we have now avenged the death of our commander, and we're going to hold any further hostilities. And it reminds me that Trump basically did the same thing to Syria early in his presidency, where whatever reason he had to do something big and bad to Syria, and so they threw a few Tomahawk missiles and blew up an airstrip, and minimal damages. I think the other side did have a couple of casualties, but so anyway, these like kind of fake attacks for PR, or I don't know. I want to ask you, is there some parallel in ancient warfare where like a king would order some kind of fake attack or something?
Well, I could see the one parallel that works, and it has nothing to do with the ancient world, that pops out at me right here. Remember when Trump did the fake attacks on Syria? After dragging his feet and getting a lot of media criticism for not wanting to bomb Syrians, he did it like the day after the Vegas shooting. And the Vegas shooting was obviously a deep state operation. So, obviously the day after the shooting, some dude in a gray suit and sunglasses came to him and said, look, unless you do something in the Middle East that we want you to do, we're going to start killing more of your voters, because this was a country music concert that got shot up. And then boom, he does this fake attack. Well, right before this fake attack, you had the impeachment. So again, and the impeachment is driven by deep state intelligence agents. That's who is going there, and they're giving these whatever testimonies they're giving. So I think this is just part of this situation where the deep state is really trying to get a cold war going against Russia and a hot war going against mid-level players for whatever reason that they have. And in the ancient world, nothing really comes to mind as far as phony wars go. If you really don't want to commit your army resources, then there's going to be some kind of negotiated settlement, some kind of marriage or hostage exchange. And if you want people to feel like something has been decided and you don't plan on exchanging much in the way of resources at the end, but you just want to get the hotheads in your military off of their drive to fight in a war and get glory, then you would just choose champions and have them go out. This would happen on a tribal level a lot more than it would happen on a national level. So I don't think we have really a good correlation in the ancient world today. At least it's not coming to mind.
That's what was my thinking, is that this is something kind of innovative. This is an aspect of modern warfare where you have to somehow manage the consent of the quote-unquote governed, or quote consent, whatever it is. And it wasn't really possible to do it when people were actual people fighting against each other, but now we can just remote control.
In a tribal, ancient, or medieval setting, people know that they have enemies, and they know who their enemies are. The French and the English knew who their enemies were, and they were across the channel from each other. The thing that changes here is with the modern state, you have so many people under your roof, and so many of these people are natural enemies of each other, that they had to be convinced that there's some kind of monstrous fantasy artificial energy. Every time I talk to military guys, they use the terms bad guys to describe the enemy. I mean, it's just a default term, bad guys. This is in their training. Okay, so in the ancient world, you would have, let's say in the medieval world, during the 100 Years' War, the English and the French would commit brutal atrocities against each other. But when it came to the main combatants, the aristocratic horsemen on either side, they would take each other hostages, and they'd hold each other as honored guests, and they would exchange the hostages in return for ransoms and such. And they weren't called bad guys. They would be the French, okay? And they would be our honorable enemies.
Right.
But the concept of the honorable enemy is written out of modernity, because the real enemy is basically the people that are supposedly your servants and your rulers is your real enemy. And your other real minor enemies are the people that are housed under the same national roof with you and who are set at your throat and you are set at their throat. So there has to be the monster, something like Grendel or the dragon has to be invented as this vast, evil, irredeemable enemy, as in Orwell's 1984. There just has to be this foggy idea of the enemy that's going to come for you. And I believe that's why either foreign agents were either permitted to conduct the 911 attacks or U.S. agents conducted the 911 attacks. Those are kind of the only two things that make sense. Because with the Soviet Union out of the way, there needed to be like this ultimate evil enemy, because the state had been calibrated to manage people with that were living under that threat of nuclear annihilation.
You need some kind of constant tension. There was recently this huge expose, which I haven't even finished reading, about the Afghanistan papers, which shows that our warfighting efforts are totally a joke. There's basically there's people fighting for gender equality. There's people who just have no idea what's going on. I mean, there's no overarching strategy from a military point of view. And I think that's obvious because these things have been going on for 20 years with nothing really changing. But from a political point of view, it's like we have to get people riled up. And people really like to be at war. It's really shocking. There's definitely a contingent of people who promoted Trump in 2015 and 2016 and who have since been extremely disappointed, particularly by this lack of enforcement on immigration and a lack of a drawdown on this foreign policy stuff with the Middle East. But the truth is, lots of normal people think it's fantastic. They think that Iran needs to be taken down a peg, and then to be fair, Iran has done some things against U.S. that, if we had some sort of national ego, like they boarded a ship and took some sailors hostage, and then they gave them right back and stuff like this. But I mean, it's like people like to be at war. They really do. They just like it on the left and the right.
Well, it's why football is so important to the running of this country.
Yeah.
To just develop this mentality. And the other thing is Trump won a popularity contest, which put him in victory over a rigged game. Okay, so he's a guy that knows how to manage his own popularity, and war is popular as long as you can report on it in a positive context. As long as you don't have a bunch of Marines getting blown up asleep in a barracks where their sentries weren't allowed to be armed, okay, as happened in Lebanon in the early 1980s. As long as you're not reporting on that kind of stuff, and you can report on some kind of success, then war is a good thing for the system. I recently watched a movie, maybe you can link, it was on Netflix. It's titled Above the Best, which chronicles these Apache helicopter pilots in Afghanistan and what they went through and what they accomplished, and everything that they accomplished was phantasmorical. It was just crazy. They're claiming to be fighting hundreds of insurgents, and you can't see anything, and you're seeing what they're seeing. They're claiming to have killed dozens of scores, and they're also telling you that we can't put people on the ground here because it's too dangerous. A convoy of American and Afghan troops would have been completely annihilated by their own admission, despite being better armed than the invisible insurgents. That you don't see a single body. It reminds you of the Vietnam body count stuff, where they're just fabricating casualties on the other side. And it really
Iran did that. Iran came out with a story that 80 Americans and American and Iraqis combined, a total of 80 were dead. And so people overseas are repeating this story that there were 80 casualties on the U.S. and Iraqi side, and nobody died. I mean, I'm pretty sure U.S. casualties get reported right away. So,
well, what's not getting reported is 2 American servicemen that were killed in Kenya.
Oh yeah, okay, I heard about. Yeah, I saw that story. Yeah, okay. Not to the greater public. Nobody cares. But yeah, there was some kind of a local Muslim militia, whatever, attacking. Yeah.
Yeah, this stuff in Africa is not going to be reported like the stuff in the Mideast for whatever reason. But I think that the parochial attachment to the winning team that's cultivated with sports, and the whole idea of warfare as a video game, really combines with the current way of doing business. It's something that's maybe a little more effective for keeping people distracted from the fact that they're just being warehoused as this moral shadow than what Orwell depicted in 1984. And Orwell seems more right every month, but
I think that there's an interesting fusion of the future that Orwell saw with the future that Huxley saw. It's like they both had it right, and you see somehow meshing. But it also reminds me of the book that we read together, The Worm Ouroboros,
Yes.
because, well, to give the ending away to people, basically, like, people who love to fight war are not interested in a life of peace, you know? And what's different is that most of our country never actually fights the war. We just sit back and watch it. But nevertheless, that feeling is the same. Like, oh, this, because it's sort of like we're on the brink of peace. Like, Trump is going to draw down the troops and we're going to put everything away and it's going to be great. And it's like, actually, we don't really want that. Nobody really wants it. Like, first we have to teach these Iranians a lesson. And once we've done that, we'll find some other excuse that we still need to be there.
Oh, yes. It's not, and I don't have a problem with it because when the American legions come home, they're going to be turned on Americans. They're not going to, to a certain extent, they might be disbanded. They'll be reduced in size, but they'll come back, and the jobs that they're doing in cities and in arid mountainous regions across the world, practice subduing Baghdad is practice for rolling into Baltimore. Practice operating in Afghanistan is practice for operating in the Rocky Mountains. In fact, they filmed, I think they filmed Lone Survivor, which was a true story that made into a movie about Afghanistan with Mark Wahlberg. I believe they filmed that somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. So, eventually when empires implode, the troops come home and they point their weapons at the people that they supposedly used to serve. So.
There's a fun fact about Afghanistan because an acquaintance of mine was formerly employed at a military-industrial complex corporation, and he's a very talented engineer, and he was working on field ambulances, battlefield ambulances, and the Afghanistan contains the place on Earth that gets both the hottest and the coldest. It gets, routinely every summer it gets to 120 degrees plus, and routinely every winter it gets to negative 40 Fahrenheit. And so you have to engineer something that's going to work. The electronics and the hydraulics and whatever it is going to work in that range of, so it's very expensive and very hard to do that. So it costs a lot of money.
Hey, so that equipment will work fine in Whitefish, Montana?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. So, think about it that way. It's like if we can fight in Afghanistan, we can fight anywhere. Hot or cold or both. I mean, the same piece of equipment has to survive both conditions and everything in between.
Well, good luck to the individual guys over there, but
yeah. I mean, that's what it boils down to, is that the people giving the orders are in no danger whatsoever, and these young guys who they're young and they want to fight, and that's admirable, but they don't know any better because they're young, and that's the part that's no good.
Well, one of the guys that I coached is heading into BUDS training for the Navy SEALs, and I was interested in why, and he had a very simple explanation, is that he's sick and tired of what he called the pussy bullshit he was being spoon-fed in school and in the media and from his family. Everybody wanted him to behave in a way that he could not characterize as anything other than womanly or as a sissy. You're supposed to get a degree, sit behind a monitor for the rest of your life, make money, and then ride a riding lawnmower around a suburban ranch home, and that's life. No, he wants a place where he can be a man. He doesn't care if he's fighting, in an army that's doing evil people even.
Yeah.
he wants to be able to go be a warrior somewhere, and one of the few places you can still be a warrior is in American Special Operations. And it's an elite club. It's like, maybe a couple of thousand guys in the world that are allowed to go out with social sanction and behave in the fashion of a warrior. And I totally understand that. And I don't think that there's anything worthwhile domestically to do to serve this country. So I think going overseas to kill people for crimes real and imagined, that's perfectly okay as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, that's the old-fashioned aspect of it, and I'm not opposed to that.
Yeah,
within reasonable limits. I don't want 100% of our brave young men to go get slaughtered in some stupid, useless place, and I applaud.
If he's not allowed to do that, he'll end up being detailed to find me in a bar somewhere, zip tie me, and take me to a re-education center. Where I'm going to recant, what I've written and what I've said. Okay, so I'd rather have that guy pointed in a direction other than my old ass. I'm perfectly pleased with him being sent out against some person in some other nation that's no threat to the United States. I don't think there's any threat of Iranian Republican Guard landing in Seattle and storming beaches, or cruising in the Chesapeake Bay and taking Baltimore and D.C. and then cutting off Philadelphia. I don't think there's an actual threat that's going to happen. So to me, Iran is a great place for our guys to go and shoot people other than me.
Okay, that's fair. I have a really gruesome video to show you to cap off this podcast. We have 20 minutes technically, but anyway, this will be the last thing I show you. So this is in Moscow. It's on a bus, so this is right in your wheelhouse.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to, let's see here. So you have a fellow at the right of the screen and two guys at the left, and they're exchanging words. Oh, the guy at the right.
They're both kicking and holding on to the bars while they're doing it, and that's smart. And the guy that's got more bars accessible to him is getting more leverage, and right now he's being able to hold the other guy off. So the other guy is stripping his clothes off, and he's going to try to get a little bit closer, or try to get this guy away from the bars. He had to get one or the other.
So did you see what his buddy did?
No.
All right, watch the second guy. There's two guys at the left, so watch the second guy here. So the white shirt, now he's just in a white shirt. He comes close. So watch the second guy. Arm in there. Stab.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's so gross.
So
look how many stabs and how long it took.
It's about 20 stabs, it looked like to me.
Yeah, so.
And I had no idea that the guy behind, I wasn't even looking at him because I figured he was just a bystander, not that he was set up behind the dude.
Yeah. He just keeps going. Oh, okay, that's enough. So, violence guy. Knife violence on the bus. I mean, it's everything.
Oh, hey. And he took it under the heart, too. He took it on the right to left. He'd have been better off having the guy backstabbing him and reaching around. So that was kind of nasty, but the guy that took his coat off really wanted some action. Maybe he didn't know that the person standing behind his antagonist was an ally. Right.
But it's basically a violence project story right there on video for you. And let me go back because we need to do the book thing, okay?
And by the way, in that case, he'd have been better off keeping his jacket and his coat on.
Yes, to absorb those knife blows.
Well,
So
and partially, there's always a chance that the knife will get stripped when it gets hung up inside of the outer coat.
yeah. So I want to go back to the Iranian thing, because the reason I even thought of you when it happened was because I thought of When You're Food. All right, and When You're Food, you develop this idea that we're all just living in this predation matrix with predators and prey, and people who are maybe kind of in between, just trying to avoid. You're the guy in between, I think. But this guy, Suleimani, he is a famous commander in Iran, like their highest ranking military commander, and a great national hero, whatever. And he had, part of the story is that he had been offered as a target to at least Obama and maybe Bush, I don't know.
Obama claimed he wasn't Muslim.
But
Obama claimed that Suleimani was not Muslim.
Really? Well, he's Shia.
Yeah.
Well, but the point is that, this is how the war works in Washington, D.C., is that there's all these nerds like analyzing cell phone data and whatever, signal intelligence, and writing bios on all these guys like Suleimani. And then every day they're like, here's my report of who is available to kill. And this is what happens, they show Trump, and there's even a story, and I don't know if it's true, but that the military commanders on the U.S. side who showed Trump a list of choices of who to kill today, they put Soleimani on there, thinking that no, this is the outrageous choice that will make the other choices look better. Which I don't really buy this story, but it's a way for the bureaucracy to kind of like distance themselves from it. But I mean, this is how it is. It's just a menu. It's like a restaurant menu. Here's who we can kill today. Choose one, choose two, choose. So it made me think of When You're Food.
I had the other night when this went down with the Iranian thing, I was sitting there with a man who was a special operations unit colonel, and he's been in some of these war rooms, and he said that the president gets three guys come to him with three options that have already been heavily thought out, and one of them will be an I don't want to do this option. One of them will be this is the real messy option. Maybe a go-to if one of the other more palatable options doesn't work, and then he's going to get a chance to pick one of these things. So
it just gave me that throwback to the title of your book. It's a menu. It's a menu. Well, he's on the menu. You're on the menu. I'm on the menu.
That's right, and it's an a la carte thing. And this, and you guys, and the interesting part is, according to the colonel, he doesn't have one waiter come to him with the menu selections. There's only 3 menu selections, and each one is presented by a different waiter.
Right, and it's sort of like, I could imagine this because I was in a larger organization where we would try to game the boss like that, like, oh, this is what I want to do. This is, and I'm going to show these other options to the boss as like really bad options that I don't. It's not the good plan, like I want to go to the conference in Orlando, but I want to skip the counting inventory in North Dakota or whatever. But that's how the bureaucracy is. So the war fighters that we have in DC are just literally nerds at their computers, saying who's in range tonight, who's on the menu, who we keep an eye on all these guys, and here's the plan for taking out A, B, or C. Yeah.
Oh. So. I think it's already going on in this country. This is already being used against U.S. citizens. I'm convinced of that. And eventually, that's all it's going to be, as it's going to be like an internal hunt by the same means.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that just makes this stuff all the more interesting, looking at it from kind of the perspective of the establishment people who are going to be looking at the demise of people who disagree with with the system in the future. So
that's When Your Food, and then the bus video is The Logic of Steel, which is the Violence Project. I want people to buy books. Come on. Oh, we have to say hello. We have a bunch of new listeners, and I think a lot of them are from your appearance on the Third Rail, and some of them are because BAP retweeted my Crackpot Podcast tweet. So we have like 370 YouTube subscribers now.
Oh,
and
wow.
I had previously said that we'd have to shut it all down at 500. So I don't know how far away.
Well, say that you already got. I looked at the John Paul Barber podcast, and there's already warnings on it. So I guess they're probably automatic because of something that was said in there.
Yeah, it's age restricted. Yeah.
I really appreciate the support.
It's a free podcast, so that means you should buy books. Okay, so today's books are When Your Food and The Logic of Steel, which is now part of the Violence Project. So you also get the Fighting Edge, and the Violence Project includes The Logic of Steel and The Fighting Edge. So those are the books you should buy.
Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm going to go hike up the mountain with the Colonel.
All right. Have a good hike. Don't get caught out there by a forest nymph.
Okay, I won't.
Getting late and we've got shit to do in outer space. Mother Earth can wait. We will take the ones worth saving. Pack your bags, we are vacating now. Forever, forever. There's a cosmic radio in my head, and it's reading news articles, and the correspondent sadly said the universe is flat. He also mentioned that gravity is caused by our cavities and our reflection of time's not a receding hairline, it's all mass produced in the back of our mind. There's some things that we will never know, and I don't ever want to know. And so it goes. Let's fuck it up, let us run amok. Let's do the things that we want to do. We're animals after all. Friend. o'er the hills out yonder, through the traffic and the people